Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Greatest Games, brought to you by The Blizzard. My name is Marcus Speller. With me, of course, is Jonathan Wilson. And with us today in the pod is Alexander Holiga, independent football writer and contributor to The Guardian, 442, The Blizzard, and many, many more. Alex, a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Today we go back to the 21st of November 2007, England 2, Croatia 3 at a very wet Wembley Stadium in both teams' final Euro 2008 qualifier. Alex, as a Croatian, why have you gone for this game?
It's just obviously Croatia have had more important, bigger games before that and after that, but still this game is still somehow remembered as the game, when we show the English, So it's the status of the game in Croatia is very interesting. I think it's also interesting in England. It's one of the key games for England in their recent history, and in some respects is also the same can be said about Croatia as well. So it's just we could have gone for the most recent game against England, like in the World Cup. But I thought this would be just there are more aspects to these games that we can talk about, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, what leaps to mind for you when this game is mentioned?
I think it's just everything that was wrong about English football at that time. I was watching the build-up, as well as the highlights. I was watching the build-up again this week to prepare for this, and it's really amazing the tone. The tone is we've done it. It's all right. We're there.
Yeah.
And it's even afterwards. Michael Owen said, "I can't think of a single Croatian who'd get in our team."
Yeah.
And you think they just beaten you twice. Like, what are you talking about? And I think there was a lot of talk around the World Cup game about supposed English arrogance, and I think maybe a sort of a misunderstanding of the tone of football's coming home. And I felt that was sort of misplaced in 2018, but it's not misplaced at all in 2007. There's an astonishing self-regard about that England team, and I think even Gary Lineker at the beginning of the live coverage, I've written it down because it struck me so much. He said, "So England needed draw out of this game to go through, and they needed draw because of the whole series of freakish coincidences. It's got very little to do with England playing well."
Yes.
And he says, "It's been a little precarious at times, but by and large, it works out." Well, why would it work out? The idea that Croatia just there, just to sort of, they'd be happy to come to Wembley and just sort of play their part in this big party just because they already qualified, I think was a spectacular misjudgment, and really England deserved what happened to them.
Yeah, Alex, you mentioned it, and Jonathan has got into it more there. This arrogance of the England national team that was felt in Croatia.
Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. But if we're going to get into that, I would just for a minute, go to the World Cup game in 2018. The thing is, I don't think that the whole football's coming home theme and everything was misunderstood in Croatia. Yes, by some it was, maybe even by the manager. But I think there were people in his team or people who did understand it, even from the media, who deliberately tried to use that, to motivate the players. You must understand that, Croatia is still a young nation, is still building its football culture. And it's always, it's never just about football when the national team plays. It's always, they always put in some kind of political context, patriotism, stuff like that. And motivation is very often a key thing for them. And they are best motivated when they feel like underdogs and when their opponents are arrogant,
Mm-hmm.
So I think they just waited for somebody in the England camp or the media to say something that would remotely sound arrogant to motivate the players.
Well, didn't have to wait long, did they?
Yeah. I mean, but this is just something that is taken for granted, that English are arrogant in football. Uh, this is in partly due to, I would say, lazy journalism and stuff like that. But it's also maybe a part of Croatia's own complexes. They always have to prove themselves to somebody. And I I just think that 2 years ago they just remembered how they beat in England, before, and this is the way to go. We have to tell to the player, we have to say to the players that the English are arrogant. We have to convince them, in order to motivate them, because Croatia, the players were already really exhausted, and they played the previous two games on penalties. They won on penalties, and by the time they met England, the general expectation in the public, in the media, was that they're going to beat England. Because you know even though it's not normal for Croatia to be in the semi-final, it's not really normal for England, is it? So people didn't think. People thought maybe not that Croatia were unbeatable at the moment, but that they cannot be beaten by England. Perhaps that.
Mhm.
So by that game, they I think that they felt like they were the favorites, and this is not a good position for them. So the manager and everybody had to convince them that they are still underdogs, who are being uh, patronized by the English or whatever. So I think the situation here, it's very different from the game in 2007, because in 2007 it was really obvious that the English behaved the way Jonathan said they did.
Well, I'll tell you the worst thing from that, and it was actually the game out in Zagreb, and the press conference the day before the game, the England press conference with Steve McClaren. It wasn't translated. It wasn't translated live. It was translated afterwards.
Okay.
And if I remember, sorry, I get this confused. There's a very similar incident happened in Warsaw at around the same time. So one of them, Croatian journalists were allowed to ask questions as long as they asked in English. Or sorry, not Croatian. One of them, the local journalists, were allowed to ask questions as long as they were in English. The other one, it was just only English journalists asked questions, which is absolutely outrageous. To turn up in another country and say, no, you're not allowed to ask questions, or you're not allowed to ask in your own language.
Yeah, this is
The
ridiculous.
self-regard of doing that.
But why do you think that is, Jonathan? Why do you think that approach was taken then?
Well, I can tell you who was to blame, but
I'm not necessarily looking for names, although we're very happy to have them. But
it's a combination of a sort of craven media department that's terrified of the big dogs of the press, and I think that was the problem around sort of the end of Eriksson's era and the McClaren era. Mm-hmm. It's a combination of that, and I think back then, I think under Southgate it's changed radically, but a manager and senior playing staff who genuinely thought they were better than these other teams they played. I mean, I know Sven-Göran Eriksson is a huge hero of yours, but he was present at the draw for these qualifiers, mm-hmm. Even though he knew that he was not going to be in charge after the World Cup in 2006. And his line was, well, at least I've done a good job for them today. I think whoever replaces me will think I've done a good job. And you think, that's just, okay, England had avoided, I think they could have played Germany or Spain or Italy, and they had avoided them. But when you have a group where two teams qualify, the best team in the group is not the team you should be scared of. It's the third best team in the group you should be scared of. And so you look at this group, and you've got England, Croatia, Russia, three teams who were all capable, at various points in history, of all being very good sides. Plus, you've got Israel, who are difficult, and Macedonia, who are difficult. So this was in no sense an easy group. It was a really awkward, difficult group. And I think the fact that there was no obvious giant there, in a sense, made it even harder for that generation of England players who had this astonishing, I mean, I've used the word before, this astonishing self-regard. I mean, the sense you got all the way through the 2006 World Cup was yeah, we'll probably win this because we haven't won it for 40 years, and it's our turn. And the fact they were playing rubbish football didn't seem to occur to anybody. It was just, well, come on, it's about time we won it. You've actually got to go out and win the thing. It doesn't get given to you just because you're England.
Yeah. I mean, Alex, the Croatia side, of course, qualifying for Euro 2008, you had some good players in there. You had Eduardo, who was at Arsenal, Vernon Chodluka, Dario Simic, Niko Kovac, Olic,
young Luka Modric.
Modric, a very young player, of course, who was quite looking forward to the game at Wembley. He wasn't intimidated at all. This was a good Croatia side. Croatia, of course, we'd seen them at Euro 96 and France 98, where they were superb. Didn't qualify for Euro 2000. First round in 2002, I believe, but they beat Italy, so there was a marquee result in there. Yeah. 2004, first round in the group with England. 2006, out in the first round, of course. This seemed to be, if my memory is correct, the best Croatia side probably since France 98.
Yes, it was at least by far the most exciting. I think even up until today. The general feeling, I think, was in Croatia that we'll never have anything remotely similar to that generation of 1998 who won the bronze, and the squad was in stagnation or decline for years then, and this was the first time after in a decade that they were finally on the up. And they had young Slaven Bilic, who was this rock star manager. He was so exciting. And Niko Kranjčar, who previously played, I don't know, he was just kind of out of sorts, in the previous team led by his father, because he was there, the sole playmaker in an outdated system. And after that, when Slaven Bilic took over, he managed to somehow, blend him in along with Luka Modric. And Luka Modric was really, really exciting at the time. He wasn't the player he is now. He was different, slightly more attacking, but it was generally, it was a sense that this is really a well-balanced team, a combination of seasoned veterans like the Kovac brothers, especially Niko Kovac, who was absolutely key for that team, and some of the youngsters, even Eduardo was still quite young at the time. He wasn't anything like a veteran, and Modric was this up-and-coming star, and this is generally a very exciting time for Croatia.
What did you make of, as he was then, the young Slaven Bilic in charge, Jonathan? Because we know Bilic in this country reasonably well, a very likeable, passionate man. He got them going.
Yeah, he did. I mean, I'd interviewed him a couple of years previously when he'd been under-21 coach, and the difference between his outlook and Zlatko Kranjčar's outlook was vast. And so, I mean, I don't know. Alex, you can tell me, but I don't know if people realise at this stage quite how good this Croatia side was. But certainly the impression I got was this is Croatian football moving from the old style of football based around a single playmaker to something much more modern, much more fluid. And I remember Bilic saying that if he could choose from any players in the world, he would play a 4-3-3. And I think he did try that at first, and then he sort of realised that wasn't quite going to work. And so it ends up being this 4-1-3-2. But it's the balance of it that's perfect, because you have Modric, who at that time was almost like an old school playmaker, but with sort of a modern dynamism. You had Kranjčar playing on the left, Dario Serna, who became a very attacking right back, but at the time played sort of on the right side of midfield. Sort of he did the running that Kranjčar couldn't. And then you had
a great right foot though.
Oh yeah, a wonderful cross of the ball, really really good footballer. But the fact he goes on to become a great right back, it tells he's prepared to put in the work. He's prepared to chuck up and down. And then as Alex says, I think Niko Kovac was absolutely essential, because his energy and his reading of the game, playing as the only holding midfielder with essentially, sort of 4.5 attacking players ahead of him, and Serna kind of tucking in a bit. Without him, it wouldn't have worked. They'd have been too open.
Yeah.
So he had that 4-3-3 template, but he's prepared to amend it, and he finds this. I mean, I think balance is. You used the word earlier, but I think balance is absolutely the word for it. It was an incredibly well balanced team.
Although we did have Vedran Čorluka and Josip Šimanić as fullbacks, which neither of them really are.
Yeah, it's old-fashioned ideas of what a fullback should be, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Čorluka at the time he used to play right back at the time. Wasn't exceptionally good at it, but it was working. But it was so vastly different than what Zlatko Kranjčar had tried. He had like 7 defensively minded players in the team, But
I mean, I think the point you make about Šimanić, we might as well deal with it now, because I think it does become relevant that essentially Steve McClaren had a choice between Sean Wright-Phillips or David Beckham to start on the right, playing up against Šimanić. And Beckham had been injured, and he played less than a full game since the August for LA Galaxy. So there was a fitness issue there. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the reasons he went for Wright-Phillips was the thought that Wright-Phillips running at Šimanić would terrify him. And the game before that, Croatia had already qualified, but they lost 2-0 to Macedonia.
Oh, yeah.
And Macedonia had this little right winger, Lazarevski, was that his name? Yeah, Lazarevski, who destroyed Šimanić in that game. Mm-hmm. So I think that was why McClaren went for Wright-Phillips. The idea that Šimanić, he's a little bit clumsy, you can get at him with a smaller, nippier player.
Yeah, and if you noticed, in every game after that, England would exploit Croatia's left back position.
Yeah, but Walcott getting a hat-trick from there.
That was always the weak link, and in the games after that, under Fabio Capello, they just destroyed Croatia on the left back. When Daniel Pranjic played there, it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, 4-1 in Zagreb with the Walcott hat-trick, I think, is a classic example of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Indeed. All right, gentlemen, let's have a quick break, and then we'll talk about the game itself. See you in a moment. Welcome back to the greatest games on the Blizzard, everybody. Let's get down to it, gentlemen. England 2, Croatia 3 at Wembley. It was an extremely wet and sodden affair at Wembley. The weather was miserable. But of course, Croatia were the team. They were in top position in the group. They'd already qualified, as you've already mentioned. England, all they needed was just a draw. What could go wrong?
But, I mean, we should talk about how they got in that position. So the previous month...
Well, absolutely.
The previous month, they'd gone to Russia. They'd been 1-0 up, and then they got absolutely battered in the second half by Hiddink's Russia. And the first sort of sign of just how good Russia would be at the Euros the following year. And Pavlyuchenko ended up scoring twice. And I was at that game, and I think it was with Lufthansa. Anyway, whoever I'd flown out with had lost my luggage. So I didn't have my warm coat, and I was freezing at that game. Oh. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, I've never known a 4 minutes go by so slowly. That Russia equalise, and I was sort of thinking, well, if England can sort of see out the next sort of 5-10 minutes, they might just get away with this. And then when Pavlyuchenko scores again, looking at my watch and realising it's only 4 minutes had passed, and yet there must have been like 30 chances in that 4 minutes. It was an absolute pummelling. And so as a result of that, England could already have been out, but Russia went to Israel the day. So the weekend. This was on the Wednesday night. The weekend before, Croatia had lost 2-0 in Macedonia. Russia went to Israel, and it was 1-1 going into the final minute. Dmitry Sishev hits the post, and a minute later, Omar Golan scores this winner for Israel, which means that England only need a draw. And so they were so lucky going into this game needing only a draw. Yeah. And I think it was almost as if they thought, well, the job's done, because why would Croatia have already qualified come here to try and beat us? And Bilic as well. Bilic had at the time, he had a flat at Chelsea Harbour. And that was, I went out to Split when I interviewed him, and we realised very early on in the interview that from my balcony in a much poorer part of London to his balcony in a very wealthy part of London, we could actually see each other. We both went out on our balcony and could wave to each other.
Yeah. And I'm just around the corner from you as well, Jonathan.
Where you are, in the other direction. But Bilic is huge Anglophile. His son apparently was an England fan rather than a Croatia fan, so Bilic claimed. And so I think there was a real complacency about England.
Mm. I mean, yeah, that's right. I remember the game, of course, when Israel kind of did England a favour, because England in the group had they'd been a bit poor. They hadn't really got going after World Cup 2006 in some of those games. Beckham was dropped, then he was brought back in the side, and he was, I think it was away to Estonia, was it perhaps? He'd put in a few crosses at Crouch, got on the end of one or two others. And suddenly England looked a bit rejuvenated, and it was kind of like, oh yes, Beckham still can play a bit, and England were looking good, or not looking good, but they were looking a little bit more hopeful. That Russia game came along, destroyed. Israel then help England out, and they go into the game thinking, oh, this is a celebration. This is going to be a night to celebrate us qualifying, blah 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 blah. And the great mistake they made very early on, well, other than conceding a soft opener, of course, was the game got very heated and got quite spicy quite early on. And I remember thinking to myself, England, what on earth are you doing? You have an opponent who have already qualified. Now, that doesn't mean to say they're going to be complacent, but they have already qualified. So, they may not be as aggressive as they might be because they don't need a result, perhaps. And England, Alex, started getting there was a little bit of chat and so on. And I thought, you are making Croatia suddenly think, right, we are going to do you here. We're going to take this game to you. Am I right in saying that was the feeling?
Yeah, perhaps, because I don't think Croatia went into this game saying, "Okay, let's do it, let's win, let's trash them." It was just they just knew they were playing without any pressure. Knew that England were very complacent going into the game. And it's most of them are such characters that this just brings out, some kind of, I don't know, spite or whatever in them. Okay, we will show you, And this is, when you think about it, the game just took off by that weird first goal. It was really an awkward goal. And after that, it just, started a chain of events that would last even after that game, even maybe, a decade after that game. Because Croatians feel when they have beaten England in that game, they will never be underestimated again by England. This was like their ticket to high society, because I mean, you have to realize that at the time Croatia didn't play the big teams very often. When England played friendlies, they always played, Spain, France, all the big teams. Croatia would have to, make do with Hungary, Ukraine, or whatever, So they didn't have too many chances to play the big teams, and they were particularly motivated every time they played against them. When they played Germany, they would, they have beaten Germany more than once, beaten Italy more than once, beaten England more than once. This is kind of Croatian thing, tricky little bastards.
Absolutely. I mean, Jonathan, it was that opening goal was a disaster for England. It was Scott Carson in goal. He was put in there by Steve McClaren, which was a controversial decision. He'd obviously put Beckham on the bench, but Beckham would have his chance. But I mean, what did you make of that decision from McClaren to put Scott Carson in there?
I think it was one of those decisions that he probably should have made earlier. In that Paul Robinson's form had been poor. There'd obviously been the incident in Zagreb, which, I mean, who blame whoever you want for it, but the Gary Neville back pass that bobbles and he takes a swing at it and misses and it goes in. And I mean, really, it's one of those unfortunate things. It's not a mistake. But he was a goalkeeper to whom bad things had started to happen. I think I'm right in saying that at that point he'd let in more goals from outside the box than any other player in the Premier League that season. And so Carson had made his debut the previous Friday when England played away in Austria. And that game ended up really screwing England because Michael Owen got injured. So they'd already lost Heskey, they'd already lost Rooney to injury, and then they lost Owen as well. So McClaren in Zagreb had gone to a back three for the first time with essentially no preparation. And he went to a 4-3-3 here, having not really played. He'd been playing 4-4-2 for most of the qualifiers, and I think that really hampered England. So the Carson decision, look, it looks terrible because 8 minutes into his home debut, into his competitive debut, he lets in a 30-yard shot that, the pitch is wet. The pitch maybe wasn't as good as Wembley normally is because it had been used for American football a couple of weeks earlier. It was, Wembley was still relatively new, and I think the pitch hadn't quite bedded in to the level it has now. So, but you can make all those excuses.
It's a disastrous one to let in.
Because
but it's not. It was not really a coincidence. I've spoken to Slaven Bilic about it, and he specifically told me that he asked the players to try the shot from outside the box because he thought Paul Robinson was going to be in goal. And as you said, he had these stats that he conceded most goals in the Premier League that season from outside the box. So he also said that he knew something about the grass at Wembley that was, I don't know, more slippery than usual or more wetter, and it was raining. So he told them to take the shot from outside, particularly to Nico Kranjčar, who is very good at that. So when he took that shot, he was just following the manager's instructions, which I thought is a remarkable piece of micromanagement.
Yeah, no, it is. But I mean, I think the thing where you really blame Carson, it's okay. The surface is difficult. Let's accept that. I'm not even sure that's true, but let's accept that. But if that's the case, get your body behind the ball. And the thing is, the shot is not. It's not even a yard from him. It's right next to him, and somehow he still doesn't get his body behind it. And so when it does just kick up slightly, it just sort of flips over his arm. And his chest should be there. So if it had hit his chest and bounced out and Olic had followed it in or whatever, okay, it's a bit unlucky. This, I think, is just a horrendous error. But there's two other things I want to say about that. The first is, and this might be unfair, if you look at the players lining up in the tunnel beforehand, Carson looks terrified. And okay, maybe, from the outside, how can you tell? Maybe that's just how he prepares himself. But he does this thing. He looks left, he glances left, glances right, then looks down, takes this huge breath. He looks like a man who's very, very nervous indeed. And okay, it's your home England debut in front of 80,000 fans at Wembley.
And he missed the entire defense. Yeah. Everybody was missing. Rio Ferdinand and Terry and Cole and everybody.
In the back four was Micah Richards and Wayne Bridge at fullback, Sol Campbell and Jolyon Lescott in the middle.
Yeah.
And Campbell, the Campbell of 7 or 8 years earlier. He was a very different player to this Sol Campbell. This is a Sol Campbell who, 18 months earlier, had walked out of Highbury at half time, and okay, he's done incredibly well to get back to a level where he's getting picked for England again, but he wasn't the same player. And then the other thing, I think there's just a symbolic beauty to it that the term "golden generation" was coined by Adam Crozier, the CEO of the Football Association, and in the week after Kevin Keegan's resignation, following the defeat to Germany at Wembley. And that was a defeat caused by Didi Hamann hitting a shot on a wet pitch from 30 yards that skids past the goalkeeper. And this is the end of a golden generation, and it's caused by a shot from 30 yards skidding past the goalkeeper. So the beginning and the end of a golden generation, however misnamed it was, are signalled by 30-yard shots that go through a goalkeeper.
Yeah. And it was 1-0 to Croatia, and then it would soon be 2-0 to Croatia. Sean Wright-Phillips misses a decent chance for England. It could have been 1-1, and you think to yourself, well, it could have been different, blah, 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 blah. But Olic nips in, Alex, and it's suddenly 2-0 to Croatia with barely 15 minutes gone. And they're celebrating on the touchline, and England are thinking, hang on a bleeding minute here, we might go out. We've got a game on our hands.
Yeah, my impression was that England were still, knocked down a little bit when that happened. It was just, even that second goal was kind of awkward. I know it didn't really. You wouldn't say it was against the run of play, but it was something that you see these goals happen like out of nothing in many games. This wasn't a result of some really, well executed team effort. It was just happened, and we only added to the England shock.
I mean, you say it just happened. I know what you mean that kind of it wasn't that Croatia did anything brilliant to do it. Apart from, so Sol Campbell hits a long ball to Crouch.
Mm-hmm.
And Croatia, it seemed to me, were kind of letting Crouch win headers and knew they could pick up a second ball.
Yeah,
Niko
definitely.
Kovac gets in, picks up a second ball ahead of Lampard, and plays a very good pass out to Eduardo. And then Eduardo and Olic are good enough that it goes Eduardo to Olic to Eduardo to Olic. England don't get close to them. England is so sort of, I don't know if they're stunned, I don't know if they're complacent, I don't know what.
Yeah.
But it's one of the sloppy. I mean, Richard Williams in The Guardian described it as the sloppiest goal England have ever conceded. And that might be a slight exaggeration, but it's a horrendous goal to concede. It's just sort of England watching Croatia.
Yeah, what they were doing is something that Igor Stimac would very often say. They were standing too far apart from their players. This is his favorite expression, as if you really need to stay, very close to a player if you want to defend. But that's what happened, they were just, like watching Croatia do the thing.
And this was a problem that McClaren's England had. So here they let in 2 goals in 6 minutes. They let in 2 in 4 minutes in Russia. They've been a friendly against Germany and let in 2 in 14. The game in Zagreb, they let in 2 in 9, I think it was. Well, the Eduardo header and then the 8 or 9 minutes. 2 in less than 10 minutes. So they kept doing this. That once they let in 1, it was as if that knocked the stuffing out of them. They were very vulnerable for the next 10 minutes or so. So it sort of comes from nowhere. But even if it's coming from nowhere, that was something that England had been guilty of before. And just the failure to do any kind of defending.
Uh-huh.
And Olic is like Olic can't believe it because he goes past Carson and he's not looking at the goal as he puts it in. He's looking at the linesman as if he thinks, I must be offside because this doesn't feel right. So it's a no-look finish, but it's not like an arrogant no-look finish. It's a no-look finish going, is this allowed? Have I just not heard a whistle? Or...
Yeah, I mean, if you...
And he's well onside.
Onside, yeah. Wayne Bridge plays him by about 4 yards.
If you take that detail, how he reacted when scoring a goal, and if you remember how Niko Kranjčar reacted when he scored, it was like as if he was a bit embarrassed about it, like, what? Really? That happened.
Yeah, but it was when the first one goes in, you can hear Wembley and probably people at home suddenly going a bit, oh, hang on, that's not right.
Yeah.
Well, it was a goalkeeping error. Oh, that's a bit. Oh, let's put a cat amongst the pigeons. Okay, fine, right. Come on, back into it. And obviously, Wright Phillips has that chance. And then the second one goes in, and everyone's thinking, whoa, what's going on here? Because England, certainly as a fan, you then start to think, hang on, we've been here before in 2001 against Greece when we nearly messed it up. And a combination of David Beckham and Anthony Niemi, was it, in goal for Finland, made sure England qualified that day. And so you think, oh, okay, right. This feels different. This feels bad. This feels worse because England were clearly better than Greece when they played them at Old Trafford in 2001. I think people looking around going, Croatia look a lot better than us at the moment.
Well, and the other thing about that analogy is that so England, a draw was enough for England against Greece because Germany could only draw against Finland, which is why you mentioned Antti Niemi. Russia were playing Andorra. So Andorra aren't going to do anything. Finland did England the favour.
They tried. They
only lost 1-0.
They only lost 1-0.
But basically, Russia's 3 points were guaranteed in a way that Germany's weren't.
Was that a low for England fans? Do you think when Croatia, the full time whistle won and Croatia went, and then everyone went, oh, did Andorra nick an equaliser? Was that a particularly dark moment?
It was a possibility. Yeah.
You've always got a chance at 1-0. So in at half time, 2-0. I mean, Jonathan, this is a whole Steve McClaren obviously had his umbrella up because it was raining and he got derided. The Wally with the brolly, as the press dubbed him and so on and so forth. I mean, he didn't look like the type of man that was going to inspire England at half time.
Look, England lost that game for a whole number of reasons, one of which is Steve McClaren's management. The fact he had an umbrella is totally irrelevant to it.
Of course. I'm just going down memory lane.
The way that the tabloids are focused on that is again part of everything that was wrong with English football culture at the time. That nobody sort of thought about processes or about tactics or about how you set about winning games. It was all about image and all about moments and all about sort of courage and lion hearts. Yeah, if you get outplayed, you get outplayed. And even John Motson on the commentary, he says something like, Steve McClaren and Terry Venables, who of course was working with him by then, they'll be stripping the paint off a dressing room walls at half time. I think that's not the problem. The problem isn't that England aren't trying. Okay, there's a complacency there for sure. But the problem is they're just not very good at football. They're kind of all over the place tactically. So he brings on Beckham at half time with Sean Wright-Phillips. So I don't think Sean Wright-Phillips particularly done much wrong in the first half. But it was almost like, we need a Greece-style performance. Yeah. Let's bring on Beckham. And at least if we get a free kick, we might have a chance from that. At least corners, we know we're going to get good delivery. But I mean, that's a desperate thing to think. That the only way we get back into this is to sort of...
Well, it was quite something, wasn't it? Because McClaren had made a bit of an example of Beckham after the World Cup.
Which was embarrassing. It was preposterous. You know, it was the classic kind of... I'm going to show him a big man by sacking the kind of the big star. And it was all about gestures. It wasn't about anything real. But
it was the star he then turned to try and bail him out, of course.
Yeah, which is, again, it's embarrassing. It's sort of, he had to sort of go back on this great decision. And that, that completely undermined his authority. Yeah.
But then into the second half, England get a penalty. Was it a slight soft penalty, Alex, would you say?
I don't know.
A tricky one.
I can't quite remember. I did watch the game again, but didn't pay much attention, to be honest.
No, just too busy celebrating those goals.
It's a definite foul. It's the kind of thing you often get away with. A bridge crosses on the left. Šimunić, despite being about 8 foot taller than Sean Wright-Phillips, decides he has to pull him back and gives away the penalty. I mean, it's a very Šimunić thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
It wasn't Sean Wright-Phillips. It wasn't Sean Wright-Phillips, was it? It was.
Sorry, Defoe. Not Wright-Phillips. Defoe. Another short forward.
Yeah,
Defoe. Quite right.
Defoe had come on, of course, because England needed something. Lampard slams home the penalty, and that's where England fans then start to think, all right, hang on, here we go. Mm-hmm. This is a bit more like it. But of course, Croatia are not done. Now, obviously, they don't score again until England equalise, but Croatia still come forward. Scott Carson makes quite the save from a corner. There was a close-range header, which would have given him a bit of confidence. And then comes the moment when...
Well, and also, Olic hits the bar.
Yes, he does,
Those two chances, it's Olic's header from the corner that Carson... Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of straight at him, but he does sort of beat it away. Yeah. And then there's that instant when Olic goes through, and it's sort of him and Bridge both sort of kick at it together, and the ball loops up and clips the top of the bar. So England could easily have been 4-1 down.
Yeah, so there were chances for Croatia, as we say, and they certainly weren't done. But then Beckham gets the ball, kind of just fizzes in a beautiful ball onto Crouch's chest, who takes it down and finishes very, very well. 2-2, and England think, there we go, there it is, normality resumed. We've done it, we've got there, and if not 2-2, probably go on and win 3-2 maybe. And that was a moment where there was a huge sigh of relief around Wembley, Alex, but it would be short-lived because, as we say, Croatia certainly weren't done, and Bilic's orders to shoot on sight are actioned again, and it was a long-range shot. Petric, of course, coming on. Yeah. And Petric scores in the 77th minute to put Croatia 3-2 up, and that really knocked the stuffing out of England. And you see Bilic go mad on the touchline, celebrate wildly, of course, because again. And this is the point I was sort of making earlier. England had made the game unnecessarily niggly and spicy and aggressive, and Croatia responded to that. And so they were absolutely delighted to go 3-2 up.
Yeah, for Croatia, it was a psychological thing above everything else, I think, because this is the kind of situation that they really showed what the managers and media referred to as the character, They were 2-0 up. And then it was 2-2, and then they even, I think most people in Croatia thought, okay, this is it now. We either stay 2-2 or we lose this game. But then this, again, shot from the outside, again, on a specific instruction from Slaven Bilic, who actually introduced Mladen Petric off the bench just a few minutes before that, I think, for Eduardo. And I think... Bilic was ecstatic because at that moment he knew that this squad has character, and this is something that is going to carry them on the Euros, This was an important thing for them to show that they will not, stumble, that they can still, take that final step. And I think at that moment that he probably thought, okay, we're winning this now.
Yeah, and they did, Jonathan.
Yeah, but I mean, even that goal, it's caused by neither Gerrard nor Campbell gets anywhere near close enough to Petric. So I don't know.
Although it is a much better shot than
sure, it's a better shot, but also if you have time to line up a shot 25 yards out, and okay, he had a little bit less time than Crenshaw had, but Campbell is in the worst of all positions in that he's not closing down the shot, but he's also blocking Carsten's eye line. And Gerrard, I think, is actually should be the person who goes across to Petric. It comes down the left. I think it's Pranjic plays it square to him.
Who also came off the bench.
Yeah. So I think it was a Beckham clearance. Šibanić wins it on the halfway line, plays it down the line to Pranjic, who then knocks it inside. And Gerrard doesn't get across. And then that means that Campbell is sort of caught in this halfway position. But even then, he could charge the ball down. He doesn't. He hangs back. And again, you think, well, is that a structural issue? Is it just sort of this brain freeze? This kind of a sense of, well, it's 2-2, we'll be fine. We don't need to do this defending. And suddenly there's the ball in the bottom corner, and it's all over.
Yeah.
And the thing is that England were pathetic the last 30 minutes. They created one half chance, which was that Darren Bent, who came off the bench. Darren Bent's shot, which was looped onto the roof of the net. And apart from that, they didn't do anything. The stuffing went from them.
Yeah, I think the most remarkable period of that game was those last minutes. And, you would expect England to, throw everything they have to do something. But Croatia looked so confident in those final minutes. They looked as if they just can't hurt them. And what they did try, they just tried, the classic English way, just lumping balls in the box, and it wasn't.
But I mean, I think that is exactly the point, that England had no process to have a faith in. So when they get under pressure, they go back to the worst English trait, which is, well, if we try really hard and whack it long and run really hard, we might get something. But it's hoping for lucky ricochet. It's not, it's not proper football. It's not planned, structured football.
Steven Gerrard said years later of this that it's a memory I will have to take to the grave with me about this game, which is quite strong words. A friend of mine went to the game. He would have been about 17, 18 maybe. Him and his mate were offered £300 for each ticket they had. And they said, no, this is going to be a night to remember.
Well, they weren't wrong.
Yeah, they've never forgot that, have they? Oh, dearie me. And of course, we'll finish up just mentioning that this Croatia side went to Euro 2008 and really should have, got to at least the semi-final. Obviously, they were beaten by Turkey, but they were great in the group.
They're brilliant against Germany. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
Germany.
And so, but they may have, it was a bit unfortunate against Turkey, of course, but they did show Europe what they were capable of in that group, winning 3 out of 3. And of course, in time would be back in 2018 with one or two of those players still in the side. So
yes, somehow it still feels like it's the same team as long as Modric is playing. Even though he might be the only one now. Rakitic recently retired, and he was just up and coming player.
He came off the bench for Alex about 5 minutes some time in that game.
The Euros was his first big showing, and he wasn't the player he is now back then. But it still somehow feels that this is the beginning of this generation, and now the end. And everybody, I think most people thought that Modric would retire after the World Cup, at least internationally, but he didn't, and he's still playing. So this is like an extended life, of this generation still, in some respect.
Alex, it's been a pleasure talking to you about this game. Thank you very much for coming on the Greatest Games pod.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. For more stories like that, do check out theblizzard.co.uk. But until next week, when we're back with another great game from football, thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Cheers, thank you.
See you next week.